our lunch break panel. Let's bring in Bobby Burack. He's a columnist at OutKick.com. He covers culture, politics, sports, media. You can follow him on X at BurackBobby_. And Andrew Heaton, he's a comedian. He's the host of the Political Orphanage podcast and Adults Are Talking with Andrew Heaton show on Free People. He's also on X at Mighty Heaton. What's up, guys?
Hey,
happy spring break.
I applaud your physical prowess. I look like a pregnant meerkat when I take my shirt off. I am very skinny and out of shape compared to you. So kudos.
Really, Andrew? You're skinny fat?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm like, that's why I wear suits, because I look like a scarecrow. And then I hit like 38 and started putting on this like weird, like 1 inch of blubber. So it's very disconcerting. It's not horrible if I'm fully clothed, but in a bathing suit, less so.
Wait, Will.
Well, young Bobby here is in the prime of his life.
I get a text saying how pale I look because you're always coming off some vacation, whether it's Hawaii or Florida, and you're all tan. We got to time this better where I get you pre-vacation, not post-vacation.
Well, we could do that. I could give you a couple other tips. Move out of Michigan, A. B, take a vacation. Or C, do the television secret of get yourself a little makeup and bronzer, Bobby. And I'm not going to even lie. I mean, everyone listening can know, but we're going to be real. There's a little makeup every weekend on Fox and Friends, and you can add a little tan. By the way, Bobby, you're in the prime of your life. You're in your 20s, not like Andrew and myself. So this is it, man. This is when you got to get after it. It's after this, buddy. I've figured it out. My energy is all over the place. I don't control it. My performance is unpredictable. So you need to start doing what you're going to do right now. Get after it, Bobby.
So I have a question for both of you guys, and I mean this sincerely. So guys get a lot of energy when they're like 16. They finally get a car and they feel like they're on top of the world. But I had heard recently the midlife crisis is actually just as energizing. So do you think you have more energy when you're 45 through 50 when you go through that crisis, or 25 through 30 when you're stuck right in the middle of those two demographics?
You have more energy when you're 25 to 30. You don't get the reason that you get a charge during your midlife crisis is that you just bought a Porsche and you left your wife to date your secretary. That is energizing, but it's not anything biochemical. It's just the dumb decisions you make. But the nice thing you can look forward to is I have found my sloping, declining testosterone levels to actually be quite pleasant. Because when you're 26, you just want to like climb stuff and scream. Like if you drive by college campus, what are the guys doing? They're climbing stuff and screaming. That's all men want to do until they're about 28. And so like now, like I'm about where I want to be. It's a level of placidity that I'm comfortable with, where I'm still industrious and I still get things done, but I'm not, I don't know. I don't have a weird drive to go out and like fight and skirt chase and stuff.
Okay.
Noted. Well, what I would say, Andrew, is you've described the 1980s midlife crisis. Like, date the secretary and get the Porsche is 1980s. The modern day midlife crisis is what I'm going through, where it's like, oh, I need to get in shape. I need to do some things. I need to climb that mountain. That's the modern day midlife crisis. And all I'm saying is it's harder than doing these kind of things at your age, Bobby. But Andrew is 100% correct. You do not have more energy. You might have more inspiration, but you don't have more energy than as a young man. Hey, let's get into what I might have missed when I was on spring break with both of you guys. So first of all, I want to dive into Aaron Rodgers. There's two levels to the Aaron Rodgers story, and suspiciously, they came out at the same time. The first is that he's on a short list reportedly for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for vice president. The second is that at the same time, there's this report from CNN, Pamela Brown and Jake Tapper, that Aaron Rodgers is a conspiracy theorist who denies the reality of Sandy Hook. Now, from what I could tell as I read it poolside on spring break, this came down to two sources. And I'll go to you first, Bobby, as somebody who covers the media here. It was the reporter herself, Pamela Brown, and an anonymous source. I don't know. Like, reporters themselves being the source is simply me telling you I heard. You know, it's firsthand account, but it requires me to believe A, in anonymous sources, and B, in CNN.
Yeah, this read to me like the anonymous source had reached out to Pamela Brown, and she just happened to say, oh, yeah, he told me that too 12 years ago at a Kentucky Derby party. That's the way I took it. Look, it was there's no such things as coincidences in media. This was obviously tied to the RFK VP list. This was obviously planted and reported to damage Aaron Rodgers. But it was so bizarre because, and I think you used to put this phrase better than anybody, you can't disprove a negative. We can't disprove that this didn't happen. And because CNN didn't provide any proof, we're just left believing which side we want to. I didn't take much of that because we have no proof of it. We don't know who this anonymous source is. And Pamela Brown using herself as a source, I've never seen that in journalism to that degree, especially on a story
really
as
quick,
consequential
Bobby,
as this one.
I'll go back to you with this, Bobby, because you and I both, I was in sports media, you covered sports media.
Yeah.
That was enough for most of sports media. Like those sources and that allegation that you can't disprove. I mean, I watched, and sometimes I get so angry at sports media, commentariat, reporters, because they are so willing to do confirmation bias. Oh, I heard something about somebody that I already didn't like, so that means it's real. And they ran with that, man. They ran with, he is a pure conspiracy theorist and he's completely irresponsible. I'm not going to say it was the entirety of sports media, but it had the loudest megaphone.
Will, Rich Eisen's executive producer said that the New York Jets should cut Aaron Rodgers and the NFL should never sign him again. They called for his NFL career based off these anonymous sources.
Insane. Andrew, by the way, you can address that. And also, like, it's pretty interesting to think about. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s VP list, I mean, almost everyone is, let's put it this way, outside of the central circle of politics.
So I'm down in Austin, Texas. I met RFK Jr. last week. I went to an event that he was at. He was getting interviewed by a former head of the ACLU. I was impressed by him. I went in with very low expectations, as I do with anybody that appears to be banking on a family name. And he is somebody that seemed to me to have a very good grasp of civil libertarian issues and a inherent understanding that government will abuse whatever power you give to it. I don't know that I would agree with him on everything, but there are things that I really liked about him. And the other thing I'll note is that when I went to his campaign event afterwards, he is running a real campaign. And I mention that because a lot of the time, third-party candidates are doing a kind of ceremonial trot of ideas that are not in the mainstream, but they're not real campaigns. They're not going to functionally make it. I got the distinct impression that he is actually running for president. He's not just trying to get a book deal or going to do this and then try to segue into an ambassadorship or something. The two people that are at the top of the list right now are Aaron Rodgers and Jesse Ventura. I think Aaron Rodgers is a very interesting choice. If I were running as a third-party candidate, having somebody that is under 90 on the ticket would be pretty good, as a good contrast to the two major parties. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both older than Bill Clinton. Think about that for a minute. Bill Clinton's younger than the two major party candidates. And I think what you're seeing right now, and you're going to see a lot more of, is an attempt from the two major parties to make everything always a two-way race. And you're going to see an increasing emphasis on how do we intellectually disqualify candidates rather than actually fight them. We live in a two-party system that is run by the two-party system. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party don't actually want to compete for your votes. What they want to do is say, listen, we know you don't like us, but at least we're not the other guy. They want to run campaigns based on fear and hatred, and it's easier to do that when you've only got two options and you vote for the lesser of two evils. So when a third-party candidate comes in and goes, well, actually, I've got some ideas you might like, that's very threatening to them. And they're going to spend a lot of time and effort making them the crazy people so that no one will consider voting for them.
Right. Well, that's actually what Donald Trump represented. I mean, while he was under the Republican banner, I mean, let's be real about the policies that he represented. They were a departure from previous Republican politics, and he was an outsider. And because of that, the entirety of Donald Trump's campaign and tenure as president is fighting not just Democrats, but it's fighting every institution in American governance, from media to the intelligence agencies and the Republican Party itself. I mean, the only time he might have had the Republican Party behind him was after he got the nomination in 2016. But even after that, it was a pretty big obstacle towards him. And that's not the cult of personality talking. That's an accurate analysis of someone who existed outside the political spectrum, right? The binary choice you just provided us, Andrew. So here's what I would be curious about. Like, what do you guys think we go right back to standard old politics after Donald Trump, or did he break the seal? Did he break the glass? And so, like a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not advocating for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I don't know near enough about what he thinks, but like he's famous, he's waded into some big issues. I mean, like, do you think we'll see more of these? So I don't know who it would be, Bobby, like The Rock. Like we had The Rock right here on the Will Cain Show, and we asked him specifically, "Would you run president?" And the reaction, I see Andrew smiling. The reaction is almost always like that. But that was the reaction towards Donald Trump too, for like half a decade. On late night shows, they'd ask him, and everybody laughed. Oh, that can't be real. And so we're going to do that to everybody. That can't be real. But I'm curious: is there somebody else? I don't know. Tony Robbins, another guest, friend of the Will Cain Show. The Rock. Whoever that can come in like Donald Trump and represent a separation from the binary choice.
Well, and let's classify where Aaron Rodgers falls on the political spectrum, because this is pretty fascinating, because the legacy media will be like, oh, he's some conspiratorial right-wing kook. Not really. He actually represents, excuse me, what Elon Musk is, what Joe Rogan is, which is former Obama supporters who have grave concerns about the trajectory of American culture, and COVID opened their eyes. Aaron Rodgers is not a conservative. He's technically not a liberal at this point, but that's what Elon Musk is. That's what Joe Rogan is. That's what sometimes Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi represent. That's a movement that should not be underrated. Now, who can be the face of that movement? That's another question. But there's a lot of Americans, including Clay Travis, the founder of OutKick, who used to vote Democrat, and then between 2016 and now are so politically discontent with the Democratic Party that they have changed their affiliation. So I think that there's more Americans than we realize that fall in the category of Aaron Rodgers, who are not traditional GOPers, but don't believe in how institutions have progressed.
The reason I was smiling when you brought up The Rock is I don't think you should underestimate professional wrestlers. If not for the technicality that you have to be a natural born citizen of the United States to run for president, I think that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be president, or would have had a very, very good shot at being president. People that are clearly capable of dedication and willpower can see a market opportunity by going into wrestling, and then learn an intuitive ability to be theatrical are very powerful players. So if The Rock wanted to be a politician, I think he'd be very good at it. I think that politics has changed in several fundamental ways, although I think that Trump is probably more symptomatic than instigatory when it comes to that. One of the things you bring up, Bobby, that I think is very much correct is that the two major parties are not the sum total anymore. They used to be large parties. So pre-Trump, really more in the up till about like 2000 or so, you had a lot of conservative Democrats, and you had Rockefeller Republicans, liberal Republicans, and both of those camps have pretty much died out. They're very, very small now, to the point where in 1990, independents represented like, I don't know, maybe 20% of the electorate, and now independents are about half of the electorate. So a tremendous amount of people that might reliably vote Democrat or vote Republican do not want to affiliate with either party. And so there is a very big opportunity to reach people that are not being catered to by the establishment. I think some of the things that you're probably going to see moving forward are the way that we select presidents has changed. It's kind of flopped. So the Republicans used to have a very orderly seniority-based system. Whoever was runner-up becomes the next guy. So Romney loses to McCain, he's the guy. But McCain lost to Bush, he's the guy. And so Republicans had this very orderly system, and Democrats loved the king killer. They loved the shot in the dark that's going to change everything. So they what they loved to do was have Hillary Clinton come up, and she's clearly going to take it. And then Barack Obama out of nowhere, and like the wheel of time is broken, and this time it's different. And they loved that, and they've now flipped. They're now the lineup party. And so that dynamic's probably going to change. And then the other dynamic, which I would love to revert back, but seems to be part and getting worse of our politics, is prior to 2016, most voters voted in favor of a candidate. Now voters vote against a candidate. So you go back to Obama versus Romney. People for the most part, voted for Romney because they liked Romney or voted for Obama because they liked Obama. Now people do it because they hate Joe Biden or they hate Donald Trump. And we're voting out of antipathy. And that seems to be something that has changed and is increasing.
That's really good. Really good.
Yeah, and
point.
what you speak of is
really quick, the wrestling point. Like if we were ranking sports, this is kind of like Aaron Rodgers' point. If you're ranking sports on who would put you on the best platform to run for president, I don't know that you could beat wrestling. Like football players don't have theatrics and performance down. Basketball players at least have their face known. They at least have their face known to America. Like I think wrestling probably is number one.
And they're going to beat out actors because this happens every couple of years. Like George Clooney will flirt with running for president or something. The deal is politics is actually really grueling. You got to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go shake hands at the Elks Lodge breakfast. And you got to do it every day for months and months and months. And so I think a lot of actors in LA that like the idea of I've conquered Hollywood. I would like to go to DC and have everyone adore me. And then they're like, okay, you got to go ask for money every 20 minutes for the rest of your life. They go, or I could just be in Hollywood. Whereas those guys that are like, I wake up and I do 100 crunches and then I lift 1,000 pounds, that are like used to just having these grueling existences that are based on a light at the end of the tunnel. They're well situated for that kind of lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah. And politics is so much like wrestling, right? Where you have the good guys, the baby faces, the bad guys, the heels. And no matter what, you pretty much just cater to your side, which is so much what we're seeing. But in some ways, that group I just mentioned, the Aaron Rodgers group, they don't always do that. They're sometimes politically inconvenient and unpredictable. I think there's a market for that. And I'm going to go back to your point about, that's what I call the lesser of two evils phenomenon. And look, we heard that so much in 2016. Some people voted for Trump because they thought he was the lesser of two evils. And you have to wonder, does that eventually break where people say, I'm not going to vote against someone anymore. I'm going to vote for who I like. And maybe that elevates a third party to not winning the election, but having a bigger impact than a lot of previous ones.
All right, I want to get to two other things with you guys today. First of all, I want to talk about Don Lemon. I mean, we have to talk about Don Lemon. So, okay, Don Lemon does an interview last week after reportedly making a deal with X where he is going to exclusively post his content onto X. His first order of business is to interview Elon Musk. That interview is granted. Apparently, it goes horrifically. It's a horrific first date, and Elon Musk says that he is not gonna sign a contract with Don Lemon for exclusive content. Lemon's still free to post his content on X, but he's not going to be exclusive and he's not going to be a paid, content provider for X. But in the process, and let me tell you guys something. Like, I know Don a little bit, and we're not friends. I think I've told this. We're not friends. Okay, I actually ran into him at a bar in New York recently, and the time that I saw him before that, we had to be physically separated. So when I say this, understand that's my background. Don Lemon's contract demands to X are so absurd that it starts to make me like him again. I'm sorry, it's so stupid that it makes me go, that's a good one, Don. He asked for $5 million guaranteed, an $8 million contract a year. He asked for equity in X. He asked for a private flight, this is according to the New York Post, to Vegas, a day of day drinking, massages for he and his partner, all as part of his deal to do a 3 times a week, 30-minute show on X. That's so entitled and ridiculous that I'm like, good on you, Don Lemon. Bobby?
No. Excuse me, I have a cold. You're misreading this, Will. His demands were purposely so outrageous because he wanted Elon Musk to cancel him, because Don Lemon got so much pushback for teaming with Elon Musk. And what's happening now that he's branding himself as the guy who exposed Elon Musk, he's back on CNN. He's back doing these popular podcasts. This is the best thing for Lemon within his circles to force Elon Musk to terminate that contract before it actually ever began. I think it was so astute and wise on his part.
I hadn't heard that before. crib this in my
That
life.
was back in
the
December.
Many times I've been fired, I'm going to claim that was a stupid strategy that I put in place on purpose.
Yeah. By the way, maybe Bobby's right, Andrew.
Happened.
Like, are you giving us analysis, or are you reporting that's what's happened? He made these ridiculous demands in order to have the contract fail.
No, that's just my read from it. I don't have any sources on it, but he's loving this, right? He's the most viral and newsworthy he's been since CNN canned him. He did that video walking down the streets of New York saying Elon Musk is not this free speech absolutist. You have Jamel Hill now campaigning for CNN to rehire him because he exposed Elon Musk. This worked out very well for Don Lemon. Him being fired this time was pretty strategic.
This is Bobby Burack, the wrestling fan, Andrew. What you're hearing right here is this was all a work. And I'm telling you, Bobby's a big wrestling fan. And I'm not telling him he's wrong. Like, well, I will say Lemon is very good at manipulating the public discourse. Like, you know, this is a real hole in my game. Like, I got to figure out how to start thinking 2 or 3 chess moves ahead on these things. I'm totally inhibited by this whole being real thing, you know. Yeah. So
everything's pro wrestling, Will. I mean,
everything's
Don
pro
Lemon,
wrestling.
Look,
is there a market for authenticity?
He signed with Elon Musk. He was a bad guy. Now he's a good guy. We call that a face turn.
Wow.
Okay. Well, here's the thing, Andrew. I'm gonna put this to you really quickly.
Yeah.
Then it's awesome because this does not, like those contract demands, they surprise me zero that Don Lemon would ask for those things.
So this is great. So I get to be the kingmaker here. Option 1 is Don Lemon is a strategic genius. Option 2 is Don Lemon has an ego the size of a solar system. And I got to pick here.
Right.
Oh, I hate to do this to you. Bobby's made a convincing case. And the bit that I'll add, the bit that seemed to me to be a little bit disjointed here is using Elon Musk as the kickoff interview. If you listen to Elon Musk on Rogan, Elon Musk is a hyper intelligent guy, but he's not a charismatic speaker. He's a very level, very it would be a difficult interview. So I would love it if he came on my show, The Political Orphanage, but it'd be tough. There's a reason that they were trying to get him high on Rogan. Using that as your kickoff, if you're a veteran interviewer, is a very interesting choice. Like if you're going in, you want to do a softball interview with somebody that you already have rapport that you know is going to be really fun and engaging. And so the fact that he selected Elon Musk tells me that there was a strategic move there rather than just making content.
All right, I want to move to this final story. It's a serious story, but it's important. And it requires us to talk about it in full context. And I'm going to give some background on my thoughts on this kind of thing for a second. So Bobby will know this about me. This was a particularly, this style of story really, quite honestly, was in the top 3 that made me the most mad when I was doing sports media. So what would happen is the minute that an athlete reaches his apex, be it the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, MVP, or top pick in the NFL draft, I don't know, self-styled Pulitzer Prize winning seeking journalists would dig back through that athlete's tweets or history, and they'd go back as far as when he was like a 13 or 14-year-old, and they'd come up with stuff that was objectionable. They did it to Kyler Murray. They did it to Josh Allen. They did it to, I feel like it was a Brewer at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. They've done it over and over and over. And it's grotesque. To me, it's not just, it really is grotesque because it's adults morally crusading on the backs of children and using old stuff as evidence of how someone grows as a human being. But I think this idea that, we're moral because we were better than we were 200 years ago is only more odious. It's only slightly less odious than we're moral because we're better than a 13-year-old. Like, this is really, really vile stuff to me. Now, I need to say that, but also say the story I'm about to share with you is very, very vile behavior from some 13 or 14-year-olds. Okay? Condemnable, vile behavior allegedly taking place in Massachusetts. This is a story according to NBC 25 in Boston. I think it's NBC. It's News 25 in Boston. 6 8th graders have been criminally charged for their alleged roles in using Snapchat to set up a mock slave auction and direct hateful and racist comments towards black students. So says the district attorney last Thursday. The students are 13 and 14 years old, and they apparently set up this mock slave auction, said horrible racist things, vile behavior from these 13 and 14-year-olds. I think everyone, I don't want to speak for either of you, but I feel fairly safe that not only both of you, but me and everybody listening and watching would go, that's horrific. They set up a mock slave auction. That's horrible. But I also think that is a parenting problem. First of all, those parents need to do some long looks in the mirror and ask themselves how they're doing with their children right now. But I think that also we have to understand that children make horrible choices and decisions as they work on becoming adults, right? And this is, there's a certain segment of the media that says, oh, you're back ending what, I didn't do anything like this. I don't have anything to hide. But I know that children are children. And that's the thing. And what I can't get over is that there's a district attorney champion on, by condemning these children. This district attorney, I mean, of course he's verbally, rhetorically condemning it, as he should. By the way, the kids have been suspended from school. That's appropriate. Suspended from school. But he's charging these kids. He's charging them. I was trying to pull up the charges. It's interference with civil rights. You have it there, Andrew? It's interference with civil rights.
Interfering with civil rights and threatening to do a criminal act.
Yes. Now, these are words, right? So there is a whole First Amendment thing. Like, first of all, like free speech requires us not to prosecute criminally vile speech. Like, unless, I know the line, it's Brandenburg, the Supreme Court decision, Brandenburg. It's direct incitement of violence. These kids, we can condemn, and we should condemn, and we can also go, whoa, you're charging them for vile speech? I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that we're talking about two phenomena here. One is the speech itself something that we ought to condemn? The answer is yes. The other element is it criminal? The answer is a very hard no. What this DA is doing, and I tried to do research on this in prep for the show, Will. Like, I went to the DA's website. I went through the press releases. I couldn't find the actual laws that he was citing. And so left with the stories that we have that are just coming from local media outlets, it very much appears that the DA has said, I am prosecuting racists for being racist. That's what he's doing, is he's identified kids that have, as you eloquently put, they're saying odious things that ought to have social consequences within the school and within their family, and he is taking it to a criminal level and saying that we are prosecuting racism. Now, racism is really bad. It is something that should be socially condemned. But in the United States, for very, very good reason, based on, all of global history for all time, we've figured out that when you give government the ability to condemn opinions, it is going to absolutely turn around and misuse those. And it's going to restrict the opinions to that which helps the government. And so we've very rightly had a robust free speech regime put in place in our country where you can say odious things and you will deal with the social consequences of it, but the state is not going to prosecute you for that. And this is a great example of that. The kids are saying dumb stuff. One would hope that they will learn from this and we can rehabilitate them and they won't do it again. I don't want to ruin these kids' lives. I want to put them in the right direction. But the criminal element of this is a kind of nascent authoritarian impulse, which is you don't deal with speech by good speech. You deal with speech by treating it like a virus and lancing it and cutting it out. And that is an authoritarian, intolerant way of looking at the world. And the way to handle this is what the ACLU was doing back in the day of literal Nazis wanted to walk through Skokie, Illinois, which was a Jewish neighborhood with multiple residents that had survived the Holocaust. It could not be more offensive than that. And the ACLU, which much like Will here, was going, we agree, this is horrible. This is absolutely horrible. But it is legally their right to do it. You don't get to restrict what people say and do based on how odious you find it. You get to restrict it if it's a direct incitement of violence, if there can be legal consequences for fraud, for things like that. But if it's an opinion which is odious, you can do that. This is a very weak case based on what I've seen of threatening criminality as if they were truly going to hold a slave auction, and therefore we are going to preemptively charge them for something they did not do, which clearly they couldn't do anyway. That's a very weak way of going, we're going to prosecute somebody for being racist.
Yeah,
and then Bobby, there's the cultural angle. The cultural angle, the fact that they were 13 and 14 years old. That doesn't forgive them, but it should factor in, like in wisdom, using wisdom. Set aside the free speech angle. Just for a moment, I'm saying, just set aside the free speech angle. I just don't know about a society that takes a 13 or 14-year-old and says, okay, the district attorney is after you for your mistakes. They're terrible mistakes. But I feel really bad for the kids that they were doing this to and about. That needs to be said as well. But I just don't know about a society and a culture that morally preens on the backs of children.
Yeah, and I think this further establishes the fear people have of where speech crimes are punished more thoroughly than violent crimes, right? Like if these kids would have came to blows at recess, we wouldn't even know about this story. The district attorney would have never gotten involved, but because it's a supposed speech crime, which it sounds like it technically is, it's become this big issue where their lives might be ruined forever. And like I echo everything you guys said there. And it just comes down to such a dangerous precedent where we let these district attorneys decide what is and is not racism or even a hate crime, right? A lot of this stuff tends to be subjective, and history always shows that it repeats itself or even rhymes, and it becomes weaponized in abuse, and it just gives the people in power even more power over us. That can't happen.
Yeah. Well, Bobby Burack, he's a writer at OutKick. Again, culture, politics, media, and sports. Check him out, Burack Bobby on X. And Andrew Heaton, he hosts The Political Orphanage, as you heard it mentioned just a moment ago, and Adults Are Talking with Andrew Heaton on Free the People. And find him on X at Mighty Heaton. You guys were awesome. Thank you guys so much for doing this today. It's been fun talking with you here on The Will Cain Show.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. Like your new tan, Will.
It'll last for another week or two.